So as we dive into the whole world of in-ear monitors, I'll start off by saying it is a different world. The first time I used in-ear monitors was at a church, and after the rehearsal, I walked over to the worship leader and I said, "Hey, thank you so much. I'm never using these things again. This is horrible." and unfortunately for him and for me, I was technically gifted enough and had enough gear at home. I basically got home, grabbed the power amp, bought a monitor, plugged it all in, and just used the regular monitor, but I used the in-ear mixer. And at one point, the sound man came up to me, he said, "Man, I know you hate the in-ears, but it's killing my mix because I hear all this hunky sound coming out of your wedge. Is there any way I can get you to do that?" So then I actually took a plunge and bought some decent in-ear monitors, and which is actually the model that most of you are going to be using. And then I just committed myself to 4 weeks. So I played every week at that church. So I committed myself to 4 weeks of using in-ear monitors. And if after 4 weeks I hated it, then I'd come up with another solution. And the first week I still hated it. And the second week I was like, this is different, but I see some good stuff here. And then the third week it was kind of like, check this out. I can do this. I could never do this before. And then the fourth week was like, I'm not going back to wedges ever again. And now if I'm leading worship somewhere else and they've got a wedge for me, I'm like, okay, I'll live with it. Just because it becomes to a point where you start to hear so pristinely that you really want that. But none of us are used to it. I mean, I grew up playing in garage bands. I don't know about you guys, but like we'd all pile the instruments into the basement, crank it up, and you could barely hear it all by the end of the night. But you're used to hearing so much noise and so much mud around you that becomes the experience. And you take all of that away because literally it is, like the sound of the pickup in the acoustic guitar, and that's taking the acoustic, the sound energy, creating it to electricity, and it's going back through the mixture and then back through your personal mixture into your ears, and it's coming back as acoustic energy out of your in-ears, so that it only travels from the string to the pickup, and then from the thing in your ear to your eardrum. It's like there's maybe that much total space of where the sound is actually traveling through air, whereas we're used to hearing it traveling all over the place. So it just sounds different. And I would encourage you to just, if it's going to feel strange at first, just give it time. The first time you're going to use it, you're going to feel like you're like by yourself in a sterile, like a surgical environment, because it is just very sterile. So I just want to kind of preface it with that it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. The benefit of it from a sound perspective is gigantic, because what happens typically is you have monitors all over the stage for 5, 6, 8, however many musicians, and every one of those is creating acoustic energy in the room. Now, when a speaker's pointed right at you, you have the high end is nice and balanced, the low end is nice and balanced, it sounds great. And you take that speaker and bounce it off of a wall, and all the high end disappears, and the lows get kind of built up a little bit, and it just turns into mush. It's the guy driving by in the low rider with the that's kind of what it's starting into. It's kind of similar to that. So you multiply that times 7 or 8 monitors, and that's where the sound for the congregation starts. So the sound man now is wrestling with all that to create a good house mix. So the moment you go to in-ear monitors, all that goes away. So the mix that your congregation is hearing is significantly better than it would be if you're using wedges. And that is an instant thing. I mean, it literally, the first time you use this, your house sound guy is gonna be back there, going to be like, this is amazing. I mean, I can actually shape the sound of the bass guitar as opposed to just having this coming at me. And so your sound guys will be stoked because they'll actually be able to control stuff. So that's probably the single biggest benefit, in my opinion. As a musician, and you'll learn this as you play with it, you'll learn that having complete control of your mix is amazing. So, and the reason I'm saying that is that you can control exactly what you're hearing, and you can also control what you're not hearing. So For example, if I'm playing bass in worship, I want a ton of kick drum in my mix. I want to be able to like feel that kick drum. But you know what? I don't care what the background singers are singing. I mean, no offense to the background vocalist. It doesn't affect me, and it's not going to make me play better. It's not going to go anywhere for me. I do need to hear the worship leader, and I may not even really be as worried about what he's singing in terms of like, but like if he says, let's go back and sing that chorus, or if he sings another verse, I need to know that. That's information I need. So you learn to mix in what you need, and if you don't need it, don't put it there. Which is kind of the first thing, is if you're dealing with the mix and you're like, man, I can't hear what I need to hear, the first thing I usually ask the question is, what can I take away? Not, do I turn me up? The natural inclination is, oh, I can't hear me, turn me up. No. Let's start with this. I can't hear me. Is there anything in my mix that I could use less of or none of? Think subtractively, not additively, whenever you're doing a mix. Okay? So that's kind of the basics of this stuff. So your in-ears. So these in-ears are probably 6 or 7 years old. I probably use them between 12 and 20 times a month, and they've lasted that long. You just take care of them. Don't, you keep them wrapped in a nice little loop. Don't put kinks in the wires and stuff like that. If you'll take care of them, they'll last a really, really long time. So you guys probably would have figured this out without me, but this end does not go in your ear. This is the plug. So you have two different plugs. They're actually a different shape. There's one for your right ear and one for your left. Your right ear will have a red dot. Red equals right. And the other one will have either no dot or black or blue. I don't remember what color it is. And there are different sizes of these tips when you get them. If you have narrower ears, smaller tips, wider tips, that's kind of common sense. I would recommend playing with it a little bit. You might find a size that you really like. You might think, oh, this is perfect. But what you want it to be tight enough so that it actually turns down the sound around you. Because that's one of the other beauties of this, is it gets rid of all the other sounds, so you hear even more cleanly what you want to hear.
Can you adjust independently your right and left? Like my left ear is worse than my right.
Absolutely, you can, yeah. And I'll show you that when we get up. I'll go over to the mixer and kind of show you that. So when you put these things in, I don't have my glasses on, but I've used these things enough to know this is my right ear. So it's going to go in kind of shaped like that. I know logic suggests that this would be in the middle of the loop. It's not. It's going to go kind of like that, right? And so I don't know. Is that a letter or something we can remember? I don't know. Too early for me to think like that. So what I do is when I put this thing in, I have it kind of pointing down, and then when I put it in my ear, I twist it this way, and then it just slides right into the cavity. So I'm going to kind of put it like this, and then as I'm pushing it in gently with my thumb, I'm just twisting it a little bit, and then the wire goes up over my ear, and then I do the same thing on the other side, and then as soon as I put it in the other side, there's no questions because I won't hear you. So I just do the same thing here. I'm just kind of putting it in like this, just gently pushing it in and just kind of twisting it, and the wire goes up. And then there's a little, I don't know if you can probably see it over my head, but there's just a little thing on the wire that you just kind of pull up and cinch it up to your neck, and it holds everything nicely in place, and they're nice and tight. If you have the wrong size tips on those things, they'll either fall out because they're too loose, or they'll fall out because they're too tight. And you'll know that, like if you sing and they start falling out, you probably have the wrong size tip in, because you start moving your jaw, and that changes the shape of your oral canal. So that's kind of how those things work. So what I do with the wire is I just run it down my shirt, right? I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody what to wear. I always wear 2 shirts because sometimes I sweat, and I don't want the congregation to see how disgusting that can be. So I tend to do, a t-shirt and then a shirt, a dressier shirt on top of that. So I just literally just run it down my back, and then hope I can find it, which is always fun. No, I got it. Yeah. Love this church. So then I take this, and what I normally do is just kind of wrap it around my belt one time, kind of like this kind of thing, just like a single loop around my belt, or my belt loop. I didn't wear a belt today, kind of forgot that. But the reason I do that is so if it gets tugged, it tugs on my belt, not my ears. Right? I'd rather not have my head pulled. So I just, like right now I'm just kind of doing a quick loop through my belt loop. So if it gets tugged, it's going to tug right there. So I did, and I leave it like this all Sunday. So after worship, I just tuck them in here, and then when I walk back up on the stage, so all of these mixers have a headphone extension. So I'm just going to walk up to my mixer and grab the headphone extension, which is right here, and then I just plug me in, and I'm ready to go. Put my in-ears back in. So it's a very simple process. It's not a big deal. You can make it super inconspicuous. You can walk up here and, frequently I'm putting my in-ears in when I'm sitting down. Like if it's after the message and I'm coming up for worship, for closing worship, a lot of times I'm putting them in. At the very end there, as things are wrapping up, I'm kind of popping them in so I can just walk in, plug in, and I'm ready to fly. In our church, we use a metronome. We play with the metronome because we have a tendency to rush. So we put a click in our ears, and nobody hears that, but it tightens up the band like that because just all of a sudden you're playing to a click. You don't have someone with the range just pulling him back when he gets there. It's like, whoa, buddy. So we do a click. Some songs we actually do accompaniment tracks. Like the song Forever, Carrie Job, forever he is glorified, forever. Great song. There's all these great pads and ethereal sounds going through the whole song. We can't create that stuff, but it adds so much to the song. So we actually purchase the tracks. They're the actual tracks that are on the recording, and we play along with those actual tracks, and you have a metronome in your ear. And the beauty of that is you have a wonderful person who says, chorus, and then you sing, so you're reminded where you are in the song. And our team loves that because then we can just kind of get lost and not have to pay as much attention because someone reminds you, hey, don't forget the verse is coming up. So we do that. So there are lots of other uses for in-ears. I'm not trying to sell that. I'm just saying that there are other uses because then all of a sudden there are things that you can hear that not everybody else could hear. So the mixer, we can get into the mixer. So here's the mixer, right? Everybody can see that okay? Right? When there's a power button on the back of the mixer, right? So when the mixer turns on, so we got some sound going in. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. There's a master volume that I just affected there. So there are a row of buttons along the bottom, right? And each one of those buttons represents an instrument or a voice in your mixer, okay? When it starts up, this button over here that says main is going to be lit. So there are 2 main volumes on this mixer. And when I first picked this thing up, I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you have 2 mains? That doesn't make any sense. But then I learned that there's a very important reason for that, and I want to make sure you understand it. So this is when this button is lit, whenever the red button is lit on the corner of a channel or over here, do you see the red button going on there? Or the red light going on the button? That means that that's what's selected. So whatever's selected, all the knobs affect, with the exception of these 2 knobs. These 2 knobs are only on the output. So in other words, if I select, let's see, this is labeled Dave's voice. I don't know if it is Dave's voice in the mix, what we're doing, but it's labeled Dave's voice. If I select Dave's voice, then this knob here is his volume knob. This knob here is a pan knob for his voice. And you'll notice that when I push another button, the volume and the pan will likely change.
Pan being left and right channel?
Pan is left and right, yeah. So now I just selected, looks like Haley's vocals, and you can see that the volume changed and the panning is changing. And so it just so happens that I have some stuff panned consistently there, but you can see that when I push a different button, the volume and the pan changes. So this is the volume, this is the pan. So panning, can you guys see that there's a green light in the middle there? Okay, cool. So panning is, the green light is dead center, and then the L over here, left and right. So,
you can almost mimic the stage setup where you can put people in the same proximity to you on
yeah.
the headphones that they're on the stage. So that way I hear the basses on the left of me, I hear this on the right.
You can do that. And if you're in the middle, if I'm in the middle, I do that because it makes sense. If I'm not in the middle, you run out of space because everyone's to the right, and I'd rather have it blended in my head better. But yeah, if I'm leading worship from the middle, I typically do that. And my drums will be wherever the drummer is, and the bass where the bass player is. And so volume, pan. So when you start up, that light is going to be on. So this volume affects your main volume. This pan affects your main pan. Now, you asked if you could kind of favor one ear over the other. For the whole mix, this is where you would do that. So you would make sure that main is selected, and if let's just say, my right ear's a little bit worse off than my left ear, then I'm going to pan it a little heavier to the right so that my right ear is a teeny bit louder than my left ear. Okay, and what I would do is I would do it while music is playing. As a matter of fact, I would do everything with this while music is playing so that you can hear what is happening there. So you can get a good balance in your brain, in your head, based on what the music that you're working with in that moment. Because it could, if you just kind of set it up from memory, you're gonna end up tweaking it anyway because it's not gonna be spot on.
Question for you, Rick. When
Yes, sir.
the guys in the back are mixing for the house, that makes no impact on the signal strength you're getting.
Absolutely no impact. The only time that what they do affects you is if, and this is a little bit of a technical thing, but if they're taking a group of channels and putting them together and then sending them up here as one channel. So for example, the drums are 8 channels on the board. They're mixing that down to 1. If he mutes the drums, then they're muted here.
Okay.
But if he changes the faders, it doesn't change anything.
So in rehearsals you're getting ready, once you hear how loud Haley is singing and you're good with that, assuming she sings at the same strength, you're set.
Pretty much.
It's not going to get altered from back here.
Exactly. Yeah. What they do is not going to touch your mix in the least. What happens is the signal comes right off of, so there's no effects on your voice or your instrument, so there's no equalization, there's no compression, there's no gating, there's nothing. It just comes straight here. So yeah, whatever they're doing, with no matter what they do, it's not going to change. So like maybe right before service, you guys run like canned music right up to the beginning of service or something like that? I mean, we do, or we do a countdowns or something like that. So I can grab my acoustic guitar and double check tune.
Nice.
Well, that's still muted, but I can hear it. So not only am I looking on my tuner, but I can actually hear it, right? You can double check to make sure everything's there. If you have a song that starts right on a vocal, I can actually play that first chord so I know where I'm supposed to sing. And then, I can have that in my head 10 seconds before he unmutes it, and then he unmutes it and bam, we're going. So whatever light is on, this is its volume, and this is its pan. So right now I'm on the main, so I'm now affecting the main volume, right? And if I select any one of these instruments, that's my volume there, there's my pan. So that's kind of how that is set up, okay? Now I want to back up a teeny bit because I really think this is super important. So with this light lit, this becomes your main. And the reason there are 2 main volumes is that there's a thing called a limiter built in here. And what a limiter does is it basically is a really fast, really smart sound man. And it says, oh, that sound is getting too loud. I'm not going to let you get any louder. And it just squashes it down. So the limiter is a very great tool for protecting your hearing. It is a horrible tool to live with as a mix thing because it just squashes everything. And it's very fast and it's very drastic, which we want it to be that way. Because if there's a loud sound coming through your ears, you don't want it to get to your ear. So that's the safety thing. So the way you would set that is, so we have some music coming through here, right? So this volume, when this button is red, when the main is red, this volume affects my main volume. That's the volume going into the limiter. Now the limiter is this knob right here, okay? So a limiter is kind of backwards. So when it's cranked all the way up, that means there's no limiting. And then when I go the other direction, it starts to limit. Well, we don't have quite enough signal coming from the board because there's only a couple of channels that are coming back at the moment. So what happens with the limiter is when I have it cranked all the way up, it's off. And so in other words, what you're doing is you're setting a threshold of when it kicks in. So when you have it cranked all the way up, you're basically telling the limiter, hey, let it rip, right? Don't limit. And then as I turn it counterclockwise, I am turning up the limiter, which basically is turning down the threshold, right? And the light will light around it, but we're just not getting enough signal to make that happen right now. But there's a ring around, there's a light ring. Yeah, so on this one here you can see the ring. So that is around every one of these knobs. When that light comes on the limiter, it's limiting, right? And you'll hear it. I mean, when you're listening, it's just like, oh my goodness, that's horrible. I mean, it does squash the sound. It's a safety precaution. It's not a place to live with your mix. So what I do is I get my mix about where I want it, right? And then I just take this limiter knob. So I'll mix with the limiter like maybe there. And then I'll turn it down until it starts to limit a teeny bit. and then I'll just turn it back up just a skosh. So basically what I've done is I've said, this is where I'm living and I'm cool with it. So I'm going to go ahead and put the knob right about there, and I'm going to say a teeny bit more I can take, but not much, right? So that way my mix isn't getting all squashed down during worship. I can still hear everything, but if something bad happens, it protects my hearing.
And obviously, we'll learn this over time.
And you'll stumble into it as well. Most of what I'm teaching is stuff that I've learned just by using these things. So I've never actually gone to a class on it. It's just like, okay, so that's what you get. So the limiter is really important. This volume, so if I push that button, this volume here is sending the signal into the limiter. This volume here, the main output, is sending it to my ears. In this case, it's sending it to the sound system. So you can kind of hear stuff. Is there any questions on that? Everybody fairly cool with it? The limiter is really important, so I want to make sure that gets hit first, because to me, that's your hearing. And the ears don't repair themselves like fingers and bones do. So anything coming through it's on the output of this mixer. So anything coming through it will affect, because it's the next to the last thing that happens. So you go through the limiter, and then after the limiter's done, it's coming out the main output into your ears, based on this volume here. Okay, so we cool with that? Okay, so while this button is pushed, you now have this equalizer up here. It's a 3-band equalizer, even though there are 4 knobs. So if I turn this, you see the light kind of turns on. So I'm going to come back to this one. So right now the light behind this knob is off, right? So when I turn it and it turns on, that means that's where it's set. And there's a reason for that. I'll get into that for a second. And I can do the same thing here and say, okay, that one's set there. This one was on. So as soon as that light is on, I can change the settings, okay? So, and now what this is, the main button is lit up. I'm now affecting the output of the whole mix. So this is my bass or my low frequencies. I can turn them up or down. This is my high frequencies. I can turn them up or down. The mid is actually, the volume here is turning up and down. This is actually a frequency selection. There's a sweep thing. So in other words, I'm not affecting all the mids. I can either affect the lower mids and turn it counterclockwise, or the higher mids and turn it clockwise. I'll be honest with you, I don't use that a ton. Well, I never use it on the main output. I always keep it flat. Everything is just straight up on the main output. I use the equalizer sparingly. You're going to find that you don't need it much, because the microphones that you use are good microphones, and everything between the microphone and your ears is quality stuff. So it actually comes out sounding pretty good. But if you do need to do that, that's how you do it. So I'll show you an instance where I do change the settings. So here is the bass channel, right? So let me do this real quick. I'm just going to turn everything down, because I don't want to have a screaming loud mix. Okay, so here's the bass. So I'm going to bring up the volume a little bit. So there's our bass guitar. So if I wanted to, I could have nothing but bass guitar in my in-ear mix, which is what we're listening to right now, right? So what I'll do is I may want a little more bottom on the bass guitar. So I can grab the bass knob here. So this is selected. The red light is on bass, right? So now I can turn the bass down, or I can turn it up. The effect of the equalization of the equalizer here in your ears is pretty drastic. Yeah, I mean, if you crank up the bass a lot, your head's gonna explode. I mean, it's gonna be like, wow, this is too much bass. It's more sensitive in your ears than it is through the sound system, is what I'm trying to communicate there. So I might add a little bit of bass there. In our church, we have a separate channel for the bass drum than we do for the rest of the drums. So if I'm playing bass, I want more low end out of the kick drum. If I'm not playing bass, I probably don't crank up the low end out of the kick drum quite as much. I might, I want to have it there if I want to know what he's playing, but it kind of depends on what you want out of your mix. And as you're doing this, think about, what do I really need out of my mix? You may find that it changes over time. I know a vocalist who has a beautiful voice. The only thing she puts in her mix is the piano, so she can get pitch off of the piano. Now, their worship leader leads from the piano, so the piano is always played. So she has the piano, she has the worship leader's voice, and she has, if there's other vocalists, she has their voices, she has the snare drum, and that's it. She doesn't have any bass, she doesn't have any guitar, none of that. All she has the snare drums. I figure the drummer will keep me in time with the snare drum, and I'll get pitch off the piano, and I'll hear what everybody else is singing, and that's it. So she has about 5 channels, maybe 6 channels in her mix, and that's it. So the equalizer can be affected in that way. So I can grab a channel, so I can say, hey, here's the acoustic guitar. So I can bring that up some, and I can say, well, you know what, I want to kind of shape the acoustic guitar, so with the equalizer. So now if you look, all the lights are off, because these knobs are knobs, just like a traditional knob. So that you have to put it where it is on that channel. So when you go to a different channel, you're changing that knob, right? So those lights are off. So if I want to go back and get to my starting place, I turn it until the light comes on. So the bass light didn't come on yet. There we go. So the last time we used this mixer, the bass was cut a little bit on the acoustic guitar. Same thing for all the other knobs. So I can just turn them until they turn on. There we go. So that's the mids, and then there's the frequency for the mids, and then let's see, there's the highs. So right now the acoustic guitar, the highs are boosted a little bit, the lows are cut, and the low mids are cut. So if I go to flat, I can just take all these things right to the middle, and that's a flat acoustic guitar sound. If I want to put more sparkle in it on top, I can crank up the highs, the treble. You know, I can put some low. I would probably, on acoustic, I probably would cut a little bit of lows. I don't need that low frequency information out of the guitar all that much. Okay. So you'll see when I change to another channel, some of those lights are on, some of them are off, right? Because that's where that channel is set. When I go back to the acoustic guitar, they're all on now because that's where I just set them. So that's how the equalizer works. And you can do that on every single channel. I wouldn't recommend going nuts with the equalizer. You're going to find that sound is going to be really good without playing with it too much. So if you want to, have at it. I just don't that much. I found it's pretty good sound without it. I mean, if you're using junky microphones and you're trying to fix the sound of a bad mic, that's one thing. But your vocal mics are excellent mics. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The volume is too loud. So
here's a question for you, Rick. So you get your whole set as far as your panel here, and then you're off for 2 weeks. You come back. Is there any way to remember what you had? I mean, if the team is that consistent, or do you have to start every time?
I need to have a disclaimer here. I did not pay him for my segues, just for the record here.
Because there's all these boxes. We throw them in the closet. You pull them out, and they're all shuffled. I mean, how is it memorized, or is it not?
It can. The trick is making sure you're on the same mixer. Now you're probably going to find that the mixers will probably stay close to where they are. Like obviously the drum mixer is not going to move because it's attached to the drum kit. And I think you'll find that a lot of times the mixers are the same. So if you're using the same mixer, so all you need to do is say you get your mix where you want it, is you're going to come up here and there's a button that says store. So you're going to hold down the store button, okay? And then you're going to pick any one of these 16 buttons, and that becomes where you store things. And that becomes who you are on that individual mixer. So I can say I'm going to store this at 10, because I'm a 10, of course. And now there's my mix for 10. I can change the mix, and then what I want to do is I hit recall, which is right next to store, and I push the 10, and that mix comes in its entirety comes back. So you can save your entire mix. And that's great. It works great as long as you're using the same mixer. Yeah, and you're going to find that you're tweaking anyway. It's never going to be push the button and I'm ready to fly. It's going to be push the button and I'm really close. It's just reality. Stuff, it just saves a little bit of time, yeah. So, you can discuss, how you want that, what numbers go where. Basically at our church, I basically use the instrument. If I'm a bass player, I save it on bass. Now you guys have more than one bass player, so that might be, you kind of have to figure that out. But if you use the same mixer for the bass player, then you can just use whatever system you'd like to set up. So yes, you can store that. So the next thing that I'm gonna really strongly recommend is when you're doing an in-ear mix, use the pan a lot. if you pan everything to the middle, everything's fighting for your attention in the middle. But God has done an amazing thing with your ears and your brain that, you know, if Pastor Chris is talking, I can pinpoint right where he is, right? But if Dave says something, I don't have to see him. My brain can say, it's not there, it's there, right? And if Bruce were to say something, my brain can say, it's there. That's how God created us, right? Take advantage of that. Because the littlest difference in pan can create a ton of space in the mix. And instead of having everything jammed on top of each other, you can just put little teeny spots. And everything has its own little spot, and it's easier to hear. So I'm a huge, huge proponent of panning. So panning is left and right. So when I'm doing a mix, this is very, very egotistical, I'm always the center, which makes sense because my brain is going to expect to hear me in the middle of its ears. So I always mix around myself as the center. So whatever, if it's your voice, if it's your instrument, if it's both, start with you in the center. Okay, so let's see. We have Dave's voice here, right? So we're going to say, I don't know if this is true, but we're going to say Dave is playing the acoustic guitar. So I'm going to take the acoustic guitar and I'm going to put it in the center. So if I turn this up, can you guys hear the difference? Like, so I'm going to pan, right? You hear it coming out this way, right? You can hear that difference. So I'm going to put that right in the middle. Now you guys aren't sitting in the middle. You guys aren't sitting right in the middle of the sound system, so it's going to, I mean, if you want to hear the difference, you want to come over here, you might hear the difference better. So right now I got the acoustic guitar dead in the middle, and I've got Dave's voice right in the middle, right? So if I'm Dave, I'm starting here, saying, okay, I want to hear my voice.
Excuse me, whoa, you were the guy that said.
So to my ear, that's a pretty good blend between my voice and my guitar. You may like more of one or the other, and the beauty of a personal mixer, if you like it different, it's your mix. You do whatever you want with it. And the beauty is no one even knows. So if you don't put someone in the mix, like if you blow off the bass in your mix, just don't tell the bass player, and you can still think it's, you know, man, I'm rocking the whole band, and it's okay. Okay, so that's where I'm starting. So now I'm going to take the bass. Now I don't want the bass in the middle because I'm in the middle and I'm not the bass player, right? So I'm going to take the bass. I'm just going to come off the middle a little bit. And by doing that, I separate in my brain. I separate the acoustic guitar from the bass and my voice from the bass. So they're all separate now in my brain. Right? So let's see here. Is that actually violin? Oh, that's a tambourine. So I don't want the tambourine in the middle, so I'm going to put that off to the side. Now, to me, a tambourine, no offense if there's any percussionists in here, a tambourine is not the most important instrument in a worship band. So I might skip the tambourine. Just don't tell the guy who's playing percussion that I said that. But if I wanted it in the mix, I would put it way to an extreme because I don't need it anywhere near the middle, right? So I might take the tambourine and stop playing and pan them way off to the right or way off, like all the way left, all the way right. And I'm only going to turn it up just a teeny bit because I just want to hear a little bit of the click of that tambourine. I don't want the tambourine in my ear big, right? So that's kind of the basics of a mix, and then you do that with every instrument and with every voice. So the way I look at panning is you never want to have two different voices or instruments in the same spot. And there's enough options for panning to do that. I mean, if you're playing with the orchestra, obviously not, but you know, we got what, drums, bass, guitar, maybe two guitars, keys, handful of voices. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of room across the panning on that mixer to separate everything. I will put, like if I have a guitar player that sings, I will put their voice with their guitar for the same reason that kind of Chris was saying is key. You kind of get a sense for where people are. It just makes sense. If I'm used to hearing his guitar and his voice is with it, that's a little bit different. But I would never put like two voices in the same spot, especially if they're similar voices. If I have like two women singing with me, I'm panning them apart for sure so I can tell what each one is doing. Okay. Now in my case, and in a worship leader's case, you're also the music director. I don't know if your church kind of does that way. I think you guys do. Like whoever's leading worship is kind of in charge of the band, right? So you're also the music director. So and I do the same thing in my church. So I have everything in my mix because I need to know what everybody's doing because I'm the music director. So I spend a lot of time getting my mix just right. But when I'm just playing on a worship team, my mix is very, very different. And it depends on the instrument I'm playing. If I'm playing keys, you know, I'll have a little bit of acoustic guitar. I'll have a little bit of bass, so I'm not stepping on the bass player with my left hand. You know, I'll be aware of these things. But in my mix, like, you know, if I'm just playing and I'm not singing, I just got the worship leader and I don't have any of the background vocalists. I mean, they're wonderful people. They love the Lord. They're worshiping well. Great. I don't need them to affect what I'm doing. So that's my 2 cents on mixing.
It sounds like there's a whole lot of settings and playing and tweaking you can do in reality. I mean, how long does that take each time? Or once you do the recall thing, is it kind of a set and just tweak it down the road?
Yeah, I think we typically will run through a song at the beginning of rehearsal, and the purpose of that is to get your mix. So 3 minutes. You'll find that it's going to get really, really close in 3 minutes. You know, and then you might find you're tweaking a teeny bit throughout rehearsal. And
Next time you play a week later, you can just do the recall?
we don't even use the recall at my church because it's just, you know, it's just like, oh, it's going to take me 3 minutes. So yeah, once you get the hang of it, it's like, you know, like you're going to, I'll come right back, but you're going to say, you know what, I never have the backup vocals in my mix. I'm a bass player. I never have that in my mix. Well, you're going to go there, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pop, pop, pop. You're going to go through all the background vocals and turn them off. So you kind of know where you're going to be anyway. You had a question?
Rick, how do you know which is drums, which is bass? Is that predetermined?
It is predetermined, and I don't know if you can, I guess you can't read it on here. It looks like the light's a little bit hot. See this white strip down here?
Oh, yeah.
So Chris created a piece of paper that, if I cover it, there you go. Yeah, so if I cover it up, you can see he actually has the whole thing labeled. Yeah, so it says here, drums, Dave's vocals, Stephanie's vocals, Kylie vocal, Haley vocal, bass, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keys, violin, choir, house mic. So a quick word on house mics. So the house mics are these mics that are pointing at the congregation here. As a worship leader, I kind of want to know what's going on with the congregation. And if I have in-ears in, I don't hear that acoustically. So I bring the house mic up so I can hear what's happening in the congregation. If part of it you can look and see, are they singing? But it's also nice to have audio cues.
Along with that, say you have a specialty instrument like violin, viola, cello. Do you just add it to that strip?
Yeah, Chris will just add it to the strip. Or he may come up at the beginning of rehearsal and say, hey, you know, channel 12 is not violin, it's flute or whatever. Like I don't know how he's going to manage it, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got yeah, exactly.
They're in the same position on each.
And they're the same position for everybody. Yep. So if you get into a situation where something is mislabeled, and you realize, oh, I'm actually in channel 8 and it says I'm in channel 4, then you can say, hey band, I'm in 8, not 4. And then it's the same for everybody.
Will the teaching mic be in that or just the house mics?
So the answer is anything can go in there. So at our church, we have all of the instruments, all the voices. We have a house mic that is in there. We have a channel that we call Speak. And any handheld mic, any teaching mic, anything that someone would talk into is in our ears, so that if
Even like the closing prayer, walking up and plugging in, then you know when he's done.
Right.
to start.
And you hear what he's praying too, so the worship leader can come off of, pastor might be praying about, subject A, and then you don't want to start with the final song like something totally unrelated, So yeah, you can hear what's going on. So anything that goes into that mixer in the back can come out of these mixers. It's just up to the sound man how it gets there. There are some other functionalities on here, some things you probably ought to know. So there is a mute right here. I guess you can kind of sort of read that. This is a mute button.
You click mute to activate it and then select what you want muted.
There we go. Thanks, Chris. He knows it better than me. Another thing you need to know about muting. Okay, so you can mute something accidentally, I learned. And if you push the volume button in, it mutes it. So here's Dave's mic. I'm just going to push this in, and you see his volume went away. So I've had some situations where people are like, my mic's not here, what am I doing? And at first I was freaking out what's wrong, and then I learned, oh, that's it. So that is also a mute. The beauty of that is if that guitar player that's going crazy and like making everything loud is going too nuts and making us all nuts, I can just reach over and push a button and mute them. Go away, guitar player. I don't want to hear you. So the mute thing is kind of important because you can mess stuff up with that. You can solo channels. You hit that if you just want to listen to one channel. You're never going to do that, but you can if you want to. You can link channels. You can hold the link button down and hit a bunch of different channels, and now the volume and the pan will affect all of those channels. I never do that. To me, I don't want them together. I want them all separate. Now I could see it if you had if it was like a jazz trio and you had like all the drum mics and the bass mic and the piano and all that stuff coming in one, then yeah, you could probably take all your drum mics and put them together so you can bring the drums up and down. I could see that, but in a setting for worship, I just can't. I'm really having a hard time finding why I'd want to link two channels or group a bunch of channels. So that's what they're for. If you want to play with it, have at it. I've never found a reason to use them in the setting of worship in the church. Okay. Is there anything else I wanted to touch base on? That's about all I got. That's about all I got.